All right. Welcome, everybody. Tonight's topic is interviewing skills, a little bit of interviewing questions, and some detailed pieces around interviewing. So there should be some fun, interactive feedback that you guys can participate. It will go a lot smoother if you participate. I am Joe, so I am your greeter and your presenter tonight, one and the same. So you guys have to deal with me for the next 58 minutes, roughly, give or take a couple. So I'll start off by asking a question. Obviously, that's an interviewing skill that we have to work through, but I'm going to ask a question and I want feedback from each of you. How important is the interview process when you're trying to get a job? Blake?
Very important because you have to get interviewed before you even really have a chance of getting the job.
Okay. Any others have feedback? Awesome kid.
Medium important because even if you're like really great at being interviewed, you still have to be, qualified and stuff.
That's good. What about the other two or three? Okay. So interviewing is where you get to set your first impression for an employer, right? So if you come in and you have cut off jeans and cut off sleeves on your shirt, are you making a good first impression of getting a job at an employer? Nope. Probably not a good idea, right? If you come in and you got in an argument right before you walked in the door with somebody and you come in and you're in a foul mood or you're not being polite, is that a good idea for interviewing? Okay. So I'm going to go over, we have a list of 10 things here that are really, really important when it comes to interviewing skills. Okay. Some of these are more detailed, some of them are not. The number one thing you want to do on an interview, before you go interview, you need to do a little bit of research of what you're going to interview for and the type of job you're going to be doing. Okay. Doesn't sound like that's an interview skill, but if you walk in for an interview and they're asking you, what do you do again? Or you're asking the employer, what do they do again? You're not really putting a good spotlight on yourself, right? So that's the number one rule. Before you go to an interview, you should know what you're going to interview for and what that company does for the role that you're going to be filling. What type of company is it? So if you're going to Burger King, you should know that it's a burger joint, right? And there's probably going to be working in food services. That's a different job than if you say are going to go work at a orthodontist office, right? That's more secretarial type job where you're going to be on the phone a lot. So there's going to be a lot of different type of environment. So depending on what job you're applying for, the more research you likely would want to do. A Burger King or McDonald's or that service industry, even a Outback or a Texas Roadhouse or whatever, all of that service industry and is working with people and is working with food. And you can be hosting, you could be working through the serving, you can be that's waiting on tables, that kind of thing. So that's your food and service environment there. If you're working at like an office setting, they're probably going to ask you more questions on how do you know different programs? Can you answer emails? Can you write? There might be an aptitude test on your writing skills. So depending on where you're going to look for a job, there's going to be different skill bases that will be needed, right? In the job application, they usually tell you what you need to have in qualifications, whether that's a high school diploma or a GED, or do you need to have a college degree? Do you need to have advanced college degrees with a master's or a PhD or something in that regard? In the interview process, they're probably going to review what you did in school a little bit, especially if there's a degree that's needed for a particular job. So they'll ask you questions about your degree and what you learned in school. Maybe one of the questions they'll ask you is, what was your favorite subject when you were going through this particular degree path? So have those on the tip of your tongue for when they ask you questions, that you don't have to really think about it. It's more muscle memory on how you respond to those type of questions. Okay. So doing your homework is number one. So if you're taking notes, you should put a number one down and do your background research. That's important. Number two, be polite to everyone, not just the person that's interviewing you. So if you go into an office building and there's a receptionist, you should be very polite to the receptionist. Though they're not the ones interviewing you, I promise you, if you're mean or negative, that will get back to the person that's interviewing you. So you need to be very polite and very make sure that you are on your best behavior when it comes to politeness, right? Don't be rude. Whatever happened in the car and somebody cut you off on the way to an interview or whatever, don't worry about that anymore. Your only thing you need to worry about is being polite and getting into the interview process in a manner that's very polite. Okay. So number three, this is a big one. Watch your body language. It's very important, right? So if you're talking to somebody and you can kind of see if I'm talking to you guys straight ahead, but I'm sitting like this, my body language is saying I'm not interested in the conversation. Okay? If I'm sitting here and I lounge way back, then I'm not really interested in the conversation. You should mirror the person that's across from you. So sitting there and you really can't see me, but sitting there, and if I have my arms crossed and I'm in this type of thing, like that's not a good body language to be in an interview process, right? This is basically closing yourself off and making it where people don't want to talk to you. Okay. If you want to be kind of reflective of what you're getting from the person, you want to smile and have a good, genuine conversation with that particular person. Before you go into an interview, you should review your own resume, right? There was a class probably 6 months ago on resume writing. We'll probably do it again in the near future. You should review and know your resume before you go into the interview. When I'm interviewing people at my job, most of the time I have their resume pulled up in front of me. And that's where I'm going to get quite a few of my questions, if not the lion's share of the questions are going to come from the resume. Okay. So if you have on there that you have a bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of Knoxville, I'm going to ask you probably a question about your degree in computer science from the University of Knoxville. I might ask you how the University of Knoxville was. What did you enjoy about it? And really, it's to start the conversation and get feedback upon how much you were engaged while you were in school, right? If for some reason you are, if you put on your resume that you had a job for 5 years doing something, I'm going to ask you about that particular thing. If you put at the very bottom of your resume that you got a bunch of awards or you graduated with honors, I'm going to ask you questions about things that are on your resume. So when you're in the interview, it should not come to a shock if they ask you questions about what's on your resume. In fact, you should know every single thing that's on your resume and it be truthful, and you be able to answer to anything there's on there. And there's probably going to be things that if you have a certain degree or a certain technological experience, you're going to know there's going to be questions that go along with it that are gauged around work completion. A doctorate would have a formal type writing experience that would have to be talked through. So there's a lot of things that somebody can pull off of a one-page resume and ask you a lot of questions. That's probably where you're going to spend the majority of your time at, is questions about your resume. One thing that's really good, and you can search these on the web, prepare for standard questions. So a lot of times they're going to be, tell me about a time when you struggled through a process. Those are normal questions that will come up on an interview. There's questions about your strengths. There's going to be questions about your weaknesses. You know, don't air your dirty laundry necessarily on your weaknesses, but also know that every single person on this call and in the world have a weakness. It's okay to have weaknesses. You just need to know your strengths as well. So you put yourself in a place and in a form where you can harness your strengths and not necessarily put yourself in a spot where your weaknesses is what needs to be highlighted. Okay. But knowing those and being truthful about those is vitally important to make sure that you have, a true conversation in the interview process. We talked a little bit about your wardrobe, right? So you always want to dress one step up from where you think you're going to be at in an interview process. So if you're going to interview for a McDonald's, probably a button-down shirt and slacks is okay. Okay. If you're going to interview for a business professional job, maybe a button-down shirt, slacks, and a sport coat is good. Okay. You always want to dress one step up from where you believe you should be at for where the job is. Doesn't mean that you necessarily have to wear a suit and tie. In your research with the company, you can probably figure out a lot of times what their dress code looks like before you show up there to know where you need to be at in your wardrobe. Okay. It does say generally for most professional jobs, that means a suit or one step lower, which is a sport coat, right? A sport coat and button-down shirt is a typical professional job attire. So you would be in good pieces there. Obviously, you do not want to wear jeans. Don't wear flip-flops. You want to wear something that's a business casual or a business professional when you dress. One thing that you want to also do is be prepared with questions to ask the interviewer. Okay. You want to have questions in your back pocket that say, asking questions about the company. Maybe you get some things from their website, but you also want to get things that maybe can't be answered on the website that they can give you more detail about. And ask questions that maybe challenges of the position. What does success look like? How this position fits in with the organizational goals. You want to look like you're really interested in succeeding in the position, and you need this information to do so. So you're really trying to get information about the position that you're interviewing for, so that you can know what you need to have to be successful in that particular position. Okay. If you are going for an interview and you currently work somewhere or you just left somewhere, what you don't want to do is badmouth your previous employer. Okay. Even if it was a really bad experience and you didn't have a good time or it wasn't a good job, leave that part behind and don't badmouth them. Okay. You want to make sure that you are really talking about the forward-looking job and not what you had just been through on a different job front. Okay. Don't lie about it if they ask direct questions, but don't be super negative. And that's really big. Don't talk about your previous boss or say my boss was a jerk, or she's nitpicky or whatever. Like, even if she was, that's not necessary for an interview process to bring that up. Okay. What you want to do is you tell them what you did, some tasks you did at your old job, maybe why you left or why you're leaving. But it doesn't have to be anywhere in a negative connotation when you're having those conversations, and make sure that you keep it as positive as you possibly can. One last thing. So number 10, and I'll go back through all 10 of them so you can make sure if you're taking notes that you wrote it down. But number 10 is don't forget the thank you card. Okay. A lot of times email is used for the thank you card. You can do it that way, or you can send a handwritten thank you card. That goes a long way. We've actually had candidates that maybe weren't at the top of the list for being hired, but when they sent a follow-up email that thanked everybody for their time and their effort and pointed out a few things that they maybe learned in the interview process, it raises the stock of that particular person that they're actually able to hold a conversation and have a formal follow-up behind it. So it is extremely important if you want to get a job, and it be a professional job especially, that you follow back up with a thank you card for their time and their willingness to interview you, regardless if you get the job or not. That is very important, and I promise you, if you keep doing that, you will find the right job and you will land in the right spot. But what it does is it takes you out of the norm of every single person that's interviewed and or applied for that job and puts you back on the top, because they know that they just received a letter from you or a thank you card from you that says, hey, this person did it. I need to go really look at their resume again, go look at what was talked about again. So it basically shows politeness. So it brings it full circle. You were polite on the way in, you were polite on the way out, and then you send a thank you card on the back end, thanking them for their time and effort, which is another form of politeness. Okay. So I'm going to go through these, all 10 of them. I don't know if you guys realize we went through 10 things just then, but we'll make sure you do. Number 1 was do your background research of the company. Number 2 was be polite to everyone. Who do you not want to make mad when you come in the front door of an organization? Okay, Blake?
The receptionist.
Absolutely. The receptionist is the gatekeeper to a lot of organizations. You do not want to make that person mad. Okay? Number 3 is watch your body language. If you're in an interview, what should you be doing? Sitting straight up, looking directly at the person that you're talking to. I make eye contact, right? All the things that we've taught you along the way. That's very important. Number 4, watch your real language. I don't know if I said this one earlier. I might have missed this one. This is important. When you're speaking, don't use foul language or language that is offensive or could be deemed offensive. That's not a good thing to do in the middle of an interview. It's really not a good thing to do ever, but especially not in an interview process, right? That right there will make the single most impact on any particular interview would be if you came in and you had what would be considered a potty mouth and you're using words that you shouldn't be using. You're most likely not going to get hired in that environment. Okay. Review your own resume is number 5. Make sure you know everything that's on your resume, especially old jobs. That's important. Number 6 was prepare for standard questions. Remember, I told you online you can find a whole bunch of interviewing questions. A lot of times the people that are interviewing did the same exact search and they printed it so they could have fancy questions in front of you. And all they are reading off of a list and reading through that to say, here's some questions. The good news is when I get done with telling you what the top 10 of these were, we're going to go to one that is interview questions, and there's 27 of them. So those would be some pretty intriguing conversations. Number 7 is prepare your wardrobe, right? Dress one step up, one step above of where you believe that the company wants to dress at for their dress code. At the very least, on a professional job, you should wear a suit or possibly one layer lower than that, which would be a sport coat and a button-down shirt. Prepare your questions is number 8. So make sure you do research on their website or however else you know about the company so that you can do your research and ask questions around the job that you're seeking what maybe you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, and anything else that comes up in the way. But make sure that you have some prepared questions, because at the end of every interview is going to be, do you have any questions for me? And that's going to give you the floor to ask questions. The more questions that you have that are thoughtful and genuine, the better it's going to come off that you have good quality questions. Okay. Number 9, don't badmouth your former employer. Remember what we said here. Leave all the baggage outside the door. Don't worry about your old employer. There's no reason for you to badmouth them. And then number 10, what's the most important thing that I said on the last one? Anybody remember what I said was very important at the end of after the interview? Jack? It's not letting him unmute. Let's see if you can press a button. Does it give you a pop-up?
Send a thank you card.
That's right. Send that thank you card. That's super important. Probably, it might not let you mute back. I'll mute you. I got you. All right. Any questions on those top 10 interviewing skills? Nothing? You ready for the interviews? So Izzy asked a question, what would you wear if you want to work at a bank or fancy restaurant? Okay. So the banks, most of them these days are business professional. They're really button down shirts if you're a male, with slacks, so dress pants and dress shoes. So what I would do if I was interviewing for a bank, I would probably go in with that, with a probably a dress shirt, dress pants, dress shoes, with a jacket, sport coat, most likely. Depending on what type of interview I would be in or what position I would be in, I would possibly wear a tie. For the ladies on that, you could do a pantsuit, you could do a nice blouse with a skirt, something in that nature that you're able to dress professionally and clean and clean cut. No rips, no tears, nothing like that. We got, should you type out your answers or notes or your questions to take with you, or should you just have them in mind? And with the in-person interviews, it's okay to have some notes, but most of that you need to really have in mind what you're going to bring with you, right? So if you do enough research and know it, you're going to be able to ask questions about it, and you might pick up on cues when you're even touring the building or different things. But I would have kind of a pocket 2 or 3 questions that you'd want to have to be able to ask questions as you come into an interview, but have them, on your mind. Obviously with Zoom, some of those interviews are over Zoom now. So that makes it really easy, right? You can have a camera you're looking at here, and I've got a laptop sitting over here, right? You might look down for a second and read a quick blurb or a reminder of some sort, or have something written in front of you. So Zoom has made it easier to do an interview process, at least on the initial. But face-to-face, you'll probably, you'll want to bring copies of your resume to hand out. Even if you send it to the company, you want to hand them a hand copy resume, so it's in front of them at that time, and they're not having to go find it on an email or shuffle through it. And if you're okay, if you have a resume in a folder and it's sitting straight up while they're looking at one too, that's okay too, just to have as a refresher reminder of what's on there. But they're going to generally ask you specifics off of that resume. Allie?
If you're doing an interview and you have a computer next to you, I would not be sitting in front of a window, because you can see the reflection of your computer.
Thank you. I can also see a reflection of you guys right here. All right. Any other questions in the top 10 before I get to interview questions? No? Okay. Remember I told you some of the questions you're going to get. Number 1, Tell me a little about yourself. That's a pretty big question, huh? Anybody want to answer that? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Allie?
Okay, so if I was asked, tell me a little about yourself, I would say I'm a sophomore at Notre Dame High School. I have a 4.0 GPA. I have 5 siblings, and I'm the middle child.
That's great. So I would probably follow back up on that is, what is it like having 5 siblings? And then you can answer that. Yeah.
I would say it's loud, annoying, but it's also very refreshing.
Then I'll also say what the next question down here, number 2 is, what is your biggest weakness? So, but you just told me that you go to Notre Dame. So I would ask you, what is your biggest weakness while you're at school at Notre Dame?
Being restricted by my parents because of COVID.
Being restricted by your parents because of COVID. Okay. I'd follow that back up with, what is your biggest strength?
My biggest strength is being assertive and knowing when to say and what to say and when to say it.
Okay. I'm going to ask somebody else to answer this because you've had enough screen time for now. No, I'm just kidding. You can answer it if you'd like, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? This is a big one. 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? So everybody on this call in 5 years will be close to graduated high school, if not graduated, and probably in some secondary school in college. Blake, where are you going to be in 5 years?
Hopefully, in my second year of college as with a master's in business management.
It's good. Allie, did you raise your hand?
I was just going to say he can't be in his second year of college if he's only a freshman now. Maybe he'd be his first year of college, unless he skips grade in high school.
Allie, where are you going to be in 5 years?
Well, I will hopefully be at ETSU, MTSU, or Tennessee Tech, or UK,
Great.
or UTC.
Those 5 schools. Okay. Jake, where will you be in 5 years?
Hopefully college.
Okay. It's good. Grace, where would you be in 5 years?
Working hard. I don't know where, but like definitely working on something. I mean, it's only like 7:30, so.
Working hard. Izzy, 5 years from now, where do you think you'll be? Or where do you want to be?
I'll be just graduating high school.
Okay. Jack?
I'll be in my second year of high school.
All right. So you'll be right where all these other ones are right about now. So that'll be fun. All right. The next question that would be coming up or potentially could come up is, out of all of the candidates, why should I hire you? What sets yourself up ahead of the game?
Well, the best way to answer that question would be knowing what the job is and what the job requires.
Okay. I'm not going to tell you what the job is. Izzy, what sets you up better than Allie?
I'll come to work every day on time.
That's good. Sometimes they might ask you about how did you learn about the opening, or why do you want this job? There is, what do you consider your biggest professional achievement? So as you have more and more things that you do, even if you have honor society and a 4.0 at Notre Dame, that's something that would be a good achievement. That would be a highlight that you would reference on your first job coming out of high school or college. So that's important. You want to make sure that you're remembering what you've done that sets yourself apart. You can have one that's describe your dream job. Does anybody have a dream job out there that you've thought about? Blake?
Being the CEO of a company.
Being the CEO of a company? Okay, that's a pretty ambitious dream for sure. Anybody else have a dream job? Izzy?
I want to be a teacher or a vet.
A teacher or a vet? You could teach vets. That'd be a lot of school to get there too. So one, if you don't have another job, they might ask you why you're leaving your current job. Obviously, the first interviewing process, you wouldn't have that question really. They might ask you what's the work environment you like best, depending if you're working at a call center or outside or with your hands, right? Some of that food services will work itself out. Allie, question?
If you get fired from a job, can your new employer see that you got fired, or they just know that you're not working there anymore?
They can't see that you got fired necessarily. They might ask you a question. Why did you leave your last job?
But you could say like it just wasn't a fit for me and I decided to leave.
If you got fired, I don't necessarily recommend that. So in resumes, they will call previous employees or previous employers with their dates. Some places will give them a date of hire, a date of ending of job, and are they satisfactory to return? That's usually the go-to for HR. So if you got fired, they probably will not put you down as you're okay to be rehired. So that they will find that out. So if you don't hit that head on the interview process that says, I was let go at my last job, here's what transpired, and be truthful about it, there's a lot of chances they'll come back and find that when they're calling your previous employers. So I try to ask people to be transparent. Just because you were fired doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. Sometimes it's a layoff because there's a reduction in force. Sometimes there's, conflicts and different things. Obviously, if you're 24 years old and you have 19 jobs on your resume and you've been fired from all 19 of them, there's probably a good reason why you've been fired for 19 of them. You should probably be looking at yourself and not the employers. Right? If you're going to get a job and you're trying to be a leader, they might ask you, what is your leadership style? Right? Does anybody have a leadership style yet that they know of? Okay. Maybe tell me about a time that you disagreed with a decision. What did you do when the last time you disagreed with a decision? Allie?
I accepted it and moved on.
Accepted it and moved on. Grace?
I wrote myself a report about what I thought was the best choice, but I didn't give it to anybody. So I don't know.
I'm sure that helped though, get it off your mind, right? You were able to put it in your own words of why you think it would have been a different decision should have been made. And you don't necessarily have to give it to anybody to be able to still get that clear off your mind. So that's good. That's a good outlet to have. Anybody else? Okay. How about if I ask somebody, tell me how you think other people would describe you? Would somebody be able to describe you in a manner that would be, you have any words of how people might describe you? Allie?
A very hardworking, independent goofball.
Very hardworking, independent goofball. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Would anybody be called lazy? No. Okay. Would anybody be called smart? Would anybody be called independent? Would anybody be called an encourager? Would anybody be called funny? So those are some things that maybe would come to mind if that question ever came up, right? How people would describe you. One thing you don't want to be described as is lazy or somebody that doesn't finish a job. You don't want those. Like, you want to have positives for somebody that could describe you. One thing that might come up, or a question that might be asked, is what can we expect from you in your first 3 months? Right? This is where you're kind of selling yourself. You're saying, this is what I can do for you in the first 3 months, first 90 days. That's one that's pretty typical. They might ask you what you like to do outside of work. Does anybody have any hobbies they like to do? Sports and hobbies and things outside of what would be called work? Somewhat. Okay. They might ask you what your salary of your last job was. They're trying to get an insight of what you're looking for with a new job. If you didn't have a previous job, don't make that up. Just tell them that you didn't have a previous job and this is your first job out of high school or college. Some of the first entry jobs out of those, if you're not going into a professional field, are going to be kind of set pay anyways. There's going to be a wage that's generally posted, or they're going to tell you what the wage is coming in. So those interviews are going to be a little bit different than what you would get on a professional side of things. It's a really interesting question, and I think you guys might be able to come up with the answer. Ready for this question? This is important. You got to listen to it. Ready? A snail is at the bottom of a 30-foot well. Each day he climbs up 3 feet, but at night he slips back 2 feet. How many days will it take him to climb out of the well? Grace?
I suppose 30, but why is the snail in the well?
Well, 30 is the correct answer. And I don't know how you judge between 3 days and 2 days or what have you, and the snail should not be in the well. But the snail got in the well, and it took him 30 days to get out. Those are some things that are popular these days. It's really is not looking for the right answer, but instead looking for a little insight into your reasoning abilities. So those, like the way you answered it was, it's actually 30 days, but I don't really know why the snail is in the well in the first place. Like, that would be a good answer for that question because it means you thought about it. And then you ask questions about reality versus what was happening in the story. So that's a good follow-up. What questions do you have for me? That's one that's going to come up a lot, right? That opens you the floor to ask the questions. What we talked about in the first 10 pieces is questions you have for me. Grace?
Was there food in the well, or would it like starve to death before it got out? Because I mean, 30 days is a long time.
We're back on the snail. I guess there was snails with lettuce. Or the snail ate a lot of lettuce before the 30 days started. Izzy?
I would ask them how they got the job and how long they've been working there.
You would ask them how long they've been working there and how they like the job?
Yeah.
That's a good question. That gets them talking about themselves. That's a really good question. Any other questions? So a question that you might ask is, what are the three traits your top performers have in common? So you would ask them, that question would be a really open-ended question for them to give you feedback and insight there. That'd be something that would be very helpful for you to understand if a trait makes sense or not. Allie?
Another question you could ask is, what does a daily life at this job look like or entail?
Yep. That's actually very important. It's kind of, what do you expect on a daily? One thing you could also ask is for a job shadow. Blake?
What does it take to move up the corporate ladder?
That's good. Grace?
If they provide food, you could ask if it's any good.
That'd be good. You could ask them for a meal. Then you could tell for yourself it's somewhere you want to go eat and stay at, right? If you're in the food services, you could ask them what their favorite meal is that they serve. And then you can see how much they actually eat at their facilities. Izzy?
I would ask them what degree they graduated with in college.
What degree they had? Okay. That would probably be a good question, especially if you're in college and you're wanting to find out kind of in a mentorship program, right? If you want to learn how they got to where they are and is that somewhere you wanted to be in the next 5 years? Yep, Jake?
I would ask them why they chose that job.
Why they chose that job? Okay, that's a good question. Another question that comes to mind is what percentage of employees was brought in by current employees? So how many employees have brought in other employees, or has the employees been there for a really long time? That's a good question. Allie?
You could ask, like, what are the benefits other than the actual benefits?
Benefits like outside of health benefits or, okay. That's a good one. Any other thoughts on questions? No? Okay. Do you want me to review all 27 of those topics? Probably not. All right. There is a wealth of information out on the internet for interviewing skills, interviewing questions, things that you could come up with or questions you could ask. Izzy?
For the question one, I would ask them if they could have had another job, what would it be?
If they could have another job, what would it be? Okay. That's a good one. So we want to obviously make sure that you're learning and researching the employer is going to be your number one topic when you go looking for a job. Okay. Know what that person or what those people are doing when you're applying for the job so that you can make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Okay. Job shadowing is another thing that comes to mind when you are looking for jobs. if they will show you the job that you're going to be doing and walking through the shoes of the people doing the job, that's a really good way to get insight of the job in what it's going to do for on a daily basis for you. Okay. If it means you're sitting in front of an assembly line for 12 hours a day on your feet, is that something that you want to get into? Right? If it doesn't mean if you're going to be working in food services and you're working in front of a fryer or grill for 10 hours a day, is that something you want to get into? None of them are bad jobs. It's just a question of if you want to do that job at that time in your life, and if that's what you're willing to do for the amount of money they're willing to pay you. That's what it really boils down to. Okay. Well, I'm at the end of my prepared parts of this. If there's questions, I'm more than happy to ask or answer any of them. You're welcome to ask any questions you'd like. Otherwise, we are 13 minutes away from being done with your 58 minutes that I told you were going to be at. So, questions, comments? No? Okay. Well, hopefully this was somewhat insightful. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Hopefully when it comes down time to write resumes and start having interviewing skills, if you have more questions, you follow back up and ask those questions so that we can help you, guide you through that in the process. But it's my pleasure being on tonight with you guys, and hopefully this was insightful. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.